Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 47th episode of The Inbox, and we're going to go ahead and start off with a question from Void Roamer, who says, Question, when do I get my Merchantman? And question 2, why do they keep teasing me? I think it would be kind of funny if they just kind of continued to ignore the Merchantman requests, and all of a sudden one day it just showed up in Hangar, because it seems to be the ship that everybody's had a really hard time getting any updates on. But luckily for you Merchantman owners, after CitizenCon and they did the roadmap from 3.0 to 4.0, we did get confirmation that they're planning on releasing the Merchantman in 3.3. Now, if we assume that those are probably going to be pretty massive updates, we might say that those are going to be quarterly. You're probably looking somewhere in quarter 3 of 2017 for the Merchantman to actually be available. Now, delays are always going to happen. It may end up being, flight, like hangar ready in 3.2 and actually flight ready in 3.3, or maybe it's just both in 3.3. It just kind of depends on how they go about actually all of the development and how far they get along with it. But we can confidently say that at least CIG has officially listed the release that they're planning on having the Merchantman available, and that's 3.3. Now, when that's actually coming, we don't know, but I would say it's going to be probably midway to 3/4 of the way through 2017. That's probably the safe bet without getting anybody's hopes too far up. Ryan Delgatti says, Youngblood, this is a small question I have. Will hired NPCs be able to do as much as a player can if tasked? And whether or not they can, do they need to be told to do something, or will they take the initiative? Love your content, by the way. Thank you. Glad you like it. So with NPCs, there's going to be several different, levels or qualities of NPC. There's probably going to be like beginners, intermediates, experts, and maybe even things like aces, for example. But whenever it comes down to this, is a player going, or is an NPC ever going to be able to match a player? It's hard to say. We don't know how far they can get with the technology. Now, if you're talking about the top level NPC, it might almost be like they're really good at functions and doing things quickly. So, for example, the ability to manage shields. They see that you're being pegged with damage from the left side of your ship, so they're going to go ahead and say, shift the shields to port almost immediately. It may take a player longer to realize that the damage is coming in and actually shift the shield. So, from that perspective, an NPC may actually end up doing some tasks better. Now, and the same thing goes for like task-oriented things. Like, if you're sitting at an engineering panel and you're saying, okay, the ship is using a whole lot of power in weapons right now, and something else is being, detrimentally affected. So maybe they end up shifting some of the power automatically because the NPC is automatically kind of merged with the same computer system that's generating your ship's information. So those types of tasks, I could see an NPC doing better than a real player, assuming you've got an advanced person or an advanced NPC there. Now, I think where you're never going to see an NPC beat a player is the player's intuition. If the player is sitting there saying, okay, I'm working at an engineering station and I realize that we're being attacked from the rear, they may realize that it's more important for them to get out of engineering, run to the back turret, and actually try and get rid of that enemy fighter that's on the tail. I think those types of decisions are going to be things that players are always going to be better at, not only because they can communicate instantaneously through voice, but also because they know and can kind of use their human brain to make those kinds of decisions. Now, the second part of your question is, are they going to need to be told to do something, or will they take the initiative? I think they're going to take the initiative when it comes to things that you've hired them to do. If you hire an engineer, for example, they may stop doing, like power management and may run to actually go repair something immediately if it's breaking. I don't think an engineering NPC is automatically going to take the initiative to go mount a turret or run to the back of the ship of a constellation and hop in the Merlin to try and fight off a fighter. Those are types of things you're probably going to have to give direction on, like changing of commands and those types of things. So I think they're going to take direct orders. I think they're going to do some things on their own, but I think if you don't touch them, they're probably going to have a kind of a limitation on what they're willing to do on their own. Finn Thetis says, Youngblood, I have an 890 jump, but there's been very little to no talk about the ship. So my question is should I melt it and look into something else, or keep it and wait? Well, much like with the Merchantman, the 890 jump is slated for 3.3, so probably midway to 3/4 of the way through 2017 as far as when you're actually going to see it. Now, as far as the question of whether you should melt it and get something else, that's really a question that you can only really answer yourself, because is that the ship that you really, really want? Because if it is, and a lot of people, they haven't sold a lot of 890s out there. And so if you've got one, you're kind of in a limited club at the moment. And if you like that ability, then you probably want to keep the ship, because there's not a whole lot of other people that actually have one. Now, ultimately, it comes down to what you want to do with it. You have an 890 jump. Do you also have like a freelancer or something else smaller that's going to be like your daily driver? An 890 jump is kind of it's funny. It's a limited multi-purpose ship. And what I mean by that is it can do a couple things, but it's not going to do a whole lot of things. For example, it's going to be able to do some exploration. It's going to do some VIP personnel transport. It might be able to do some cargo. It's going to be able to do touring. It's not really much of a combat ship. It's not made for mining. It's not made for, there's like other tasks where it's not necessarily a great fit. So it kind of comes down to really what you want to do with it, and if you think the ship is going to help you meet those needs. If you're comfortable waiting, the ship meets your needs, and you're a big fan of the ship, by all means, wait. There's no need to get rid of it at this point. But until I actually know what you really want to do in the verse, it's hard for me to say melt it or keep it. It's really dependent on those types of questions. Question from Akarin says, I'm not sure, but I seem to remember Robert saying something about it being possible to choose how much multiplayer you want to the extent of it being possible to go completely single player. Is that the plan with the game? And if there are going to be huge limitations as to how much you can do in regards to what you can earn, find, etc. So, Robert's actually said that there's going to be a PvP slider, meaning that you can kind of dictate how much interaction you want to have with other players to an extent. You're never going to be able to turn it off, and you're not going to have a single-player version of the game, but theoretically you're supposed to be able to say, I would rather see NPCs than other real players. And you're going to be based, the interactions that you're then presented with, like when you jump out of Quantum, for example, are probably going to dictate whether you're seeing NPCs more often or real players. I agree with a lot of things that Roberts is doing with the game. I have a lot of faith in the project, but this is one of those areas that I've got a core fundamental difference of opinion on. I don't think you should have an open world sandbox and allow the players to say how much interaction they want to have with other players. The idea is it's an MMO. Multiplayer, being one of those keywords there. And when you start saying how much interaction you can have with other players, you start almost setting difficulty sliders in a way. So you may have some people that can go out and do massive cargo runs, only face NPCs, and not be really in all that much danger based on that. We saw that a little bit with Elite Dangerous. And in Elite Dangerous, they actually give you the ability to play online solo, meaning that you're basically playing without running into any other players. And the best other ships in the universe are always other players. So if you're saying that you're not going to be a real threat, or you're not at risk of having real players being a threat, you're essentially playing an easier version of the game, but still have the same earning potential. And that's one of the ways that we ended up seeing people get big ships very quickly, was they would go in, they'd play in solo mode, they'd make all their money playing an easier version of the online experience, and then all of a sudden they would come in with their anacondas and they were just a real pain to deal with. I don't like the way that kind of is from a fundamental perspective, and I'm really hoping that that slider, if it does end up making it into the game, is something that is a very minimal difference. Maybe if you drop down to the lowest slider possible, you're 30% less likely to see a real player, as opposed to 90% more or less likely to see another player. I guess some customization is okay. I don't like it at all, but as long as it's not providing people with an advantage for going that way, then I'm probably okay. Raid Cloud 123 Gaming says, question, if a big clan or org battles near a planet, will the planet suffer from that battle? And will the big clan org be able to control certain planets or space station by battles? And if this is possible, what ships would be suited for doing it? So with this, I don't think you're going to necessarily see like a javelin get destroyed and fall onto the planet and cause like an explosion destroying half of the city. I mean, maybe we do. I mean, during the CitizenCon, we saw the crashed javelin on the desert planet. I think what's more likely going to happen is if there's an ongoing extended conflict at the planet, maybe all of a sudden it becomes more difficult for convoys and supplies to actually reach the planet, meaning that the planet then suffers because they're in need of supplies to, run their civilization. That in turn may end up kicking off different types of missions, like, blockade run through and bring in the supplies that are needed. That's kind of speculative because these planets are huge, and you may have a big clan battle or org going on, but compared to a planet, the number of ships that are going to be engaging each other is pretty nil. So you could still technically fly past the planet where the battle's going and come back on a different trajectory and then deliver your supplies that way. Now, some of that's going to be dictated based on like landing zones, for example. So if you go to a planet that only has one landing zone and you need to go through the gate and the clan is battling right by that gate, things become a little bit more complicated. That also depends on if that gate technology to land on a planet is going to be the final iteration, or if that's going to change at some point. Now, as far as your secondary question there, as far as being able to control space stations, yes, you can control a space station. That's been confirmed by the CIG team. Now, as far as what ships are going to be best suited for doing it, you got to look at a couple different options. You got to get inside to actually control the station. So drop ships are going to be important. You know, if it's like a small little hangar that you need to get into, then a Redeemer is probably a better option. If it's a landing pad like we see at Security Port Korea, then maybe dropping in a Retaliator, you bring more troops because of that. If it's a truly massive station, maybe there's some, I guess, reason there to bring in a Genesis and actually unload hundreds of troops. There's different ways that you can do it, but you need to get into the station. Now, once you're in the station, you'll already have your Marines there. So you need to defend the outside of the station to prevent people from coming in. And then all of a sudden, it just becomes kind of a fleet balancing decision. You probably need fighters, you probably need bombers, you probably need electronic warfare ships, you need scouts, those types of things. But that's more of a fleet composition question. But for just getting in, you probably want dropships. Mako Mac says, I find it funny some people buy all the ships that come out to support the game, but when the game finally comes out, what are they going to work towards? For me personally, it's get bigger ships and so on. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of, I guess, play the game and feel accomplished when you're doing so. A good example would be myself. I'm not buying every ship, for example, but I've bought way more than I probably would have if this game came out like when I was in college, for example. For me, getting the ships I want now allows me to play the game I want on release. And because I guess what I'm getting at is I don't have the amount of playtime that a lot of other people do. I've got a job, I've got a family, I've got other responsibilities that mean I'm playing, a couple hours, a night, probably 3 times a week, something like that. And because of that, I'm never going to have the same earning potential in game as somebody that plays 6 or 7 hours every single night. So with that in mind, I get the ships that I want by supporting the game, which is kind of a win-win, but there's more I can do. Even if I don't want to go out and buy another ship, I can upgrade my ship. All of the components on your ship can get better. Most of those ships that we're buying now are coming with entry-level components. So if I want stronger shields on my Redeemer or a better power plant on my Saber, like those are types of things that I can make money on and upgrade. And then once I get all of my ships in a place where I want them to be, there's other things to do. Like I need to pay for cargo up front to make a run, so I can actually then sell that cargo to make a profit. So being able to earn the funds to make more money, it's pay money to make money, those types of things. So there's different things you can do with your game, and ultimately it just comes down to whatever provides accomplishment. For a lot of people, they're not looking for the sense of accomplishment, they're looking for the experience and actually getting into the game and just being part of this next generation of, video gaming, the best damn everything game. That's what's going to give a lot of people a lot of value, and that's where it really comes down to. So for you may find it funny that people are spending all this money on ships right now, but for a lot of people, that's not necessarily a concern for them because they've got other things in mind. And for our 2 patron questions, we're starting off with one from Gators1. It says, I have a question about multiple characters. So I have 2 packages which I thought would allow me to play a good guy and a bad guy and maybe have to hunt myself down. Are those 2 packages both tied to the same RSI account? And how will that work with my ship fleet? If they're different accounts, would I have to gift them back and forth to change up the fleets associated with each character? Or if not, would each character have access to the same pool of ships just to deal with them potentially being in different locations in the universe? So, with this question, there's a little bit of kind of vagueness that we don't know about, and that's specifically about like how the reputation system goes, and whether that's directly associated with your account or whether that's directly associated with your characters. For me, I didn't want to risk that. So when we unlocked the patron goal to get the pirate character, I created an entirely separate account. I've got a few packages on my STLYoungblood account, but I didn't want to turn one of them into a pirate character because I don't know how that translates into my STLYoungblood character. So I wanted to be safe and split them off completely. I'm assuming that they know a lot of people aren't going to be willing to do that. Maybe they only have one email address. They don't want to create another one. They don't want multiple handles. I'm assuming that the characters are going to have their own reputation, not necessarily your account. That being said, we don't really know at this point. Now, as far as the way your multiple packages are going to work, you're going to be able to use the one that you're not currently embodying as like an NPC. I don't know what it's going to say. Like, you're not going to be able to be logged into both of them. So I don't think you'd be able to take your pirate guy out there and your good guy out there and then have your good guy go capture your bad guy for a bounty. Like, that's probably not a mechanic that we're going to see in the game. So that makes me think that you could hire your NPC, so your good guy could hire your bad guy to maybe be an NPC in your ship, but then you may be at risk because, hey, you've got this guy that's wanted in your ship. Are bounty hunters now coming after you because of that? Now, the ships question, though, I think any ships that you have in your hangar, either of your characters can use. But if you have them on 2 separate accounts, that wouldn't be a situation that you could actually do unless you were somehow able to log into both of them and share a ship or loan a ship over, those types of things. And the last question from Shepard says, will we have suits besides spacesuits, such as radiation suits, Class A hazmat gear, gas masks, environmental suits? I don't know how many we're going to actually get. I mean, today we see that we've got flight suits and we've got armor, so that's basically combat armor. And I think this was around the verse this week, they were showing or maybe it was CitizenCon. I'm starting to mix everything up. But they were saying that you've got the pilot who's not dressed in like armor or a spacesuit. It was saying that there was going to probably be penalties. Like your character would be like basically uncomfortable if they're flying in an armor. So they're better off using a spacesuit. And then when they get out of the ship, if they know they're going to get into cargo or combat, then you go and put on your actual combat suit. So we know that there's a couple different types of suits out there that you're going to have. Now, I don't know if there's going to be a radiation suit per se or a hazmat gear and those types of things. As far as gas masks go, essentially a space helmet is basically going to provide you the same benefit. So I don't think we're going to see gas mask. But I think there's going to be different classes of suits. So maybe you have a space suit that is better protecting you from radiation than a racing space suit, if that kind of makes sense. There's probably going to be attributes, almost like how a heavy armor provides you more hit points than a medium armor provides you more hit points than a light armor. There's probably different characteristics for those types of suits, and I bet that's the sort of implementation that we see. So that's it for this episode of The Inbox. I appreciate you guys watching. I'm starting to get caught up on questions, so if you guys have them, please get them in, and I'll try and get them answered as soon as possible. Otherwise, have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.